coming out. Okay. וידבר על מוישה, במדבר סיני באוהל מועד, לחודש השני, בשנה השני, לצאת מארץ מצרים לאמור, and Hashem spoke to the Bnei Yisrael when they went out of in the midbar Sinai, in the wilderness Sinai, באוהל מועד, the first of the second month, Hashana Hashanis in the second year, let's say some Mitzrayim, when they went out of Mitzrayim. Oops. And it says, to say, count the heads of all the congregation of Bnei Yisrael through their families to their fathers' houses, legulglotum, by their heads, make a head count. It's known the question and examination of this. Why does he have to enumerate all the details of the place? The midbar Sinai has to tell us, in the wilderness of Sinai, Ba'al Moed, the tent of meeting, Guzman has to tell us when it happened, in the first day of the second month. Seemingly, what all that matters is the main idea. This is a command, Libnois as Bnei Yisrael, to count the what does it matter that this was specifically in the wilderness of Sinai, etc., and Oil Moed, and that particular date? Bagam, another question is, this matters understood on its own from what it says after this. Since it says that it took place the first day of the second month, Rish Chodesh Iyar of the second year, so later on in Parashat Baal Loiska, it's quite explicit. It was in the second year from when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, in the second month, in other words, in Iyar, in the second year since they went out of Mitzrayim, in the 20th of the month of Iyar, and they traveled from the wilderness of Sinai. How they move, and so it's understood from that. Until the 20th of Sivan, they were still in the wilderness of Sinai. So therefore, we know that on the first day of the second month, on Rosh Chodesh year, they were still there in the Midbar Sinai. So why does the Torah over here have to tell us, they were now in the Midbar Sinai? They came they were there and counted on the first day in Midbar Sinai. Especially since the importance of saying details is usually when it has to do with a certain halach. You need to know a certain halach, and you need to know what to do, so the Torah has to tell you the details. But here, this is just a temporary thing. This is only a one-time event when they were there that Hashem had them counted. Not an ongoing, constant command that matters for generations following this. Therefore, though it's related in the general idea of the counting of the Yidden, still in all costs of the Torah does not have to say all the specific matters involved in this. When you understand the lechur and the ger rakamin the Bnei Yisrael, seemingly all that matters over here is the count, the number of the Bnei Yisrael. Seemingly, why do we need to detail all the specific matters over here? To their families they were, to their fathers' homes, as he says, for the head count, for the skulls. Why is it necessary to enumerate? Just say these were the amount of Yidden that there were. And even more, it's difficult. After he says this concerning the general Bnei Yisrael, the pasuk repeats and details. By Yiyu Bnei Reuven Gomer, that was the members of the Shevet Reuven, their offspring, to their families, to their father's home, to their by head count. We already said we're going to count them by families and by et cetera, et cetera. Why do you have to say that again by every Shevet? Well, that's a meaning called Shevet. I mean, the same thing when he enumerates every Shevet individually. He has to say again to their fathers' homes, to their families, et cetera, et cetera. Well, movement, though it's self-understood, it's called Echad Me'Shvatim. That's just the way it was by every single one of the Shvatim. Page there's no reasoning to differentiate between why would it be by one Shevet and not by the other Shevet. So if it's already says beforehand, no need to repeat it every single time by every single Shevet. Gamtzar Love knows understand. What is the lesson from everything that's mentioned above? In every single one of the Yidden Shari it's known Shari Torah, and Yitzchak's Torah is everlasting. Therefore, call Mashana about Torah, everything that's related in the Torah, or even just a story, especially something, it's not just a story. It's a command from Hashem, Limnis Yisrael, to count the Yidden. The idea of a command needs to result in a particular activity, an action that results from the command. So even though, true, the command was seemingly a temporary thing, but a lesson from a command, the Rebbe is saying, is much more powerful than a lesson from a story, because the whole point of a command is actualization. The same thing, the lesson has to have an actual application, even now. So he says, continues on line 8, it's an everlasting directive to all Yidden in all times. That is in all times, meaning literally any time of the year. If you're in the middle of Parshas Bereshis, it's still a hera. If you're in the middle of Cheshvan, it's still a lesson. It's even more so in Parshas Zubatorah when we read this parsha yearly. So then, therefore, at that time that we're reading the Torah, at that time we're learning the parsha, it's even more of a lesson than any other. Therefore, every single person, whether the one that's actually the Balkoire, the one that's actually going up to the Torah to read, and whether it's those that are listening to the reading of the Torah, they have to lulmay Torah. Bavidas needs to derive a lesson in this service. Hein ma'aminin the Chos Bnei Yisrael, both from the general idea of counting the Bnei Yisrael. The hein ma'aminin the Chol Shevet Bnei Atzmai also has to derive a lesson from the count of every Shevet individually. And he explains, the reason why it's negeh for every Yid to learn a lesson from other Shvatim from the whole Klal Yisrael, because every Yid includes in him the rest of the Klal Yisrael. Since every Yid includes in him the rest of the Klal Yisrael, it'll come on like we'll learn later, so it impacts me and it matters to me the count of a different Shevet and a different person and so on. It's known what's explained in this matter by first prefacing the examination in the expression of the pasuk. So as Rosh Goimer, raise up the head. Literally means count, but Lashon Akbar, the term that he uses, is from the word raising up. Or seemingly, since the intention that the pasuk is trying to say is to count the Yidden. There are many words that the content and the meaning behind them is the idea of counting. Why do you use specifically an expression that indicates also raising up? In other words, he could have one of the there's sphira means counting, minyan means counting, Pkida means counting, and even the Chumash Bamidbar is called Chumash Hapkudim because the numbers and the counting. So it could have used that word. Tifkoid as Bnei Yisrael, Timna as Bnei Yisrael, Tisper as Bnei Yisrael, all these other possibilities, and he specifically chooses an expression that means raising up as well as counting. It says in line 21, yes, even more so, it's difficult. Because of a suas roish, that you should count the head or raise the head. And should sarich lahagbiyas roish, you have to raise up the head. Ulaheichon magbiyin ma'asayin, to where do you raise it up to? Legulglotum, to their skulls. Simple meaning, like we said, you have to count them by head. But gulgolus is the skull part of the head. The skull is something that's beyond the head and encompasses the head. So you're raising up the head legulglotum, to the skull. Seemingly any movement's not understood. What is this connected to the idea of counting? When we count, we do not count individual limbs. We don't count how many hands there are, how many legs there are. We're counting bodies, how many human bodies there are here. And therefore, therefore, this, over here it's not understood. Why does it say raise up the head? Just say raise up the body. We're counting the person, we're counting the body, not the head. Especially according to what's explained and look at the Torah on the pasuk that says that he weighed in a scale mountains. Hashem, it's a description of Hashem's awesomeness and how huge Kaviyachal he is. So over there in a mimer on that pasuk, the Alter Rebbe explains, if you need to raise up something from the ground, top of page Zayin, one needs to grasp and grab hold of the lower parts of it. Through that you raise it all up. You don't pick it up from its middle. How much more so not from its top, not from its head. So the Chassidus always brings the expression like a lever. Now, a lever lifts up something from the bottom, and by lifting it up from the bottom, everything else is lifted up as well. So, therefore, in our case as well, if you want to raise up, so why are you raising from the head? That's not the way how you raise up. Why does it say over here specifically, raise up the head? Gimel line 5. The idea behind this is the idea of a head is the idea of intellect and brain, understanding, etc. The idea of intellect is higher than the entire body. Not just it's higher than the whole body, and it runs the entire body, directs the entire body. Therefore, it's the head and the first for the entire body. Concerning this, it says, raise up the head to their skulls. You need to take the head and raise it up to a higher level, which is the level of their skulls. The need of raising them up to the level of the skulls, specifically because it's the head. That needs an extra type of lifting. The idea of the head is understanding, comprehension, when it comes to the leg, even when the leg is in its place, in other words, not raised up to a higher level. Still in all, the entire idea of the leg is listening and accepting upon it the yoke of heaven. He listens. And he has Kabbalah soil. That's the entire concept of the leg. It follows directions. And the very nature of the leg is, on its own, it wants to fulfill the will, whatever it's told to do. Therefore, as soon as a person has a will for a particular activity, came immediately, the leg does it. There's no need for delay for time because you don't need to work on convincing the leg. Now the Rebbe says in the brackets that scientifically we do know that there's some type of fraction of a second that it does take for the message from the brain to reach the leg. So the Rebbe says in the brackets on line 18, though it's known the question that they already measured and they found that there's some minute delay of time between when I decide on something to, let's say, when my leg does it. Yeah, the explanation of this is that it's not contrary to what the Maimer is saying over here. Rather, Shashias Hazman, it's for the message, the knowledge, the awareness of the mind of what he wants. That knowledge, that awareness should reach the foot. That is something that's taking a delay of time. As soon as the foot is aware that the person has a will to move, then it'll do it immediately without any delay whatsoever. In other words, the point of the bringing in the concept of delay is he wants to bring out that there's no, the leg it does not have an independent mind and starts debating within itself, well, should I follow through on this will? Should I not follow through on this will? Should I do this? Should I not do this? The leg is completely a state of complete Kabbalah soil. The example of this is that there's no delay between the head or the person wanting something and the leg actually doing it. The fact that there is a delay is because the leg didn't know about it. It takes time for the leg to find out. But the proof that he's trying to say over here is as soon as the leg knows, immediately it does, because that's the nature of the leg. The leg is Kabbalah soil. That's the point he's trying to say. Line 24, well, right after the brackets, concerning the leg, it's not applicable to say that it has to go up to the skull. There's no elevation that the leg needs. The leg is perfect the way it is. It needs no help. It needs no transformation and elevation. But specifically the head, since the head's whole concept is about understanding and comprehension, the head, for example, when it does become aware of the person's will to do something, he starts thinking into it. What is it? And how is it? And I want to understand this idea of intellect. Intellect's idea of understanding. I want to understand this. Initially, when he understands it in a general fashion. And afterwards, he puts in effort to understand the details that's involved in it. Because every concept in intellect is to bring something down to understand it in Chabad. That's the purpose of Seichel. So I want to get it. I want to understand it. Don't just tell me to do it. I want to understand what it's about. I want to bring it down into its details, its parts. Until he becomes completely joined with the idea and becomes completely one. Because the idea of intellect is about understanding and not doing things with oil. Therefore, you need to use the intellect to go up, or you need to elevate the intellect to go outside of itself and to be elevated to its skull. But even after you raise it up to the level of the skull, the head doesn't stop being a head. The head remains a head. It's the idea of understanding and comprehension. So now the Rebbe is going to explain all of these, like seemingly transcendent or concepts. What does that mean in the practical sense? What are we talking about? He says in Ois Daled, line 4, Vinyan, about what he saw them, the idea behind this in the service of a Yid. The idea of a head by his understanding, his brain, what's that about? It's about Torah. The idea of Torah is about understanding and comprehension through the intellect that's in the head. Though it says about Torah that for Torah to be in such a way that the Torah learning will be an appropriate Torah learning, it has to be arranged throughout the entire body, and it has to be protected and kept in the entire body. Like Chazal say, if it's arranged throughout all your 248 limbs, your Torah study, so then it will be kept. It's referring to, there was once a student that, he says it on the side, he tells the story, there was once a student that was learning to himself quietly. Maybe he wasn't even pronouncing the words, maybe he was, but he wasn't. You didn't see his whole entire body invested in the learning process. Not like the way we learn, you go into yeshiva, etc. You see people are talking loudly and they're moving with their hands and they're shaking back and forth. The entire body is invested in Torah learning. That in other words, is asking, it's not just the head. So why are you telling me that it's only the head is the part that has to do with Torah and not the rest of the body? The rest of the body also is involved in Torah study. The Rebbe says the rest of the body is not doing the Torah learning. It's only involved to be able to have it stay within us. This idea that one has to engage their entire body in Torah study by speaking and the movement of the hands and shaking back and forth and all these things, this is all so that the Torah remains with him, so he doesn't forget the Torah. The idea of memory. So that the intellect that's in the head should be in a way that it's kept by the person. It's not something fleeting. It doesn't go out of his head. This has to be arranged in everything throughout the 248 limbs. The very Torah itself that he's studying, specifically in the brain that's in the head. Concerning this, it says, raise up the head to their skulls. One has to raise up the head to the level of the skull. It transcends and protects the brain that's in the head. So the Torah learning, we have to raise it up to a place that's transcendent beyond the Torah that we're learning to protect it, as we will explain tomorrow exactly what that means.